Brown.
Here.
And Chairman Eiler.
Here. We do have a quorum present. I'll just note we had a unexpected visitor this morning, County Commissioner from Finney County, Mr. Lon Pishney, has family in the metro area as well as Johnson County, and is a member of the KAC Board of Directors. So glad he was here. I told him he had a chance during public comment period to tell us all about Finney County, but anyway, glad he was here. Clerk will please read the proposed consent agenda.
Item number 1, consider approving May 10th, 2018 business session minutes. Item number 2, consider authorizing and submitting the SFY 2019 Regional Collaboration Grant Renewal Request to the Kansas Department of Corrections as approved by the Juvenile Corrections Advisory Board in the amount of $209,000 for the continuation of the Vocational Training Scholarships Program for juvenile offenders. Item number 3, consider authorizing and submitting the SFY 2019 Reinvestment Grant Renewal Request to the Kansas Department of Corrections as approved by the Juvenile Corrections Advisory Board in the amount of $320,619 for the continuation of the Day Resource Center, no-cost substance abuse evaluations and treatment, and no-cost psychological evaluations for juvenile offenders.
All right, Susan, any comments you'd like to make in regards to both item number 2 and 3?
Susan Dugan, Johnson County Department of Corrections. These are both a continuation of 3-year grants that were approved by both by the Juvenile Corrections Advisory Board. The first regional collaboration grant with the Department of Corrections. It is a regional one with Wyandotte, Douglas, and the 4th and 5th judicial districts. It helps launch juveniles into adulthood by providing them scholarships for school and things like the welding programs and different vocational programs for them.
Okay, questions? Yes, Mr. Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dugan, this has been before us before, and I understand the program is well established and has had a fair amount of success, maybe a lot of success, and I commend you for that. The question I have, though, is, and heaven forbid, if the state were to end support for this, would we have any interest in providing that support directly? Is that something that you contemplate? Not that it ends, but if it ends, how best to proceed, and what are your thoughts in that area?
At this point, we have not discussed that. It is a 3-year grant, so we would have one more year. We have struggled a little to get the number we thought we were going to get for the number of kids for these programs to go in. So we would have to look at that and evaluate that, I think, when the time came. We would hope that this money would continue because this is the money that was part of when they closed all of the youth residential center 2s was given throughout the state, and that was part of that money. So that money should be able to continue on, I would hope, from the state.
But would you argue that these programs would be deserving of funding directly if the state, for some reason, and I'm not advocating that the state stop, I'm glad they are supporting this, but that we would support part or all of these programs?
Yes, I would hope that,
Okay.
because it is a great benefit to the kids that need it.
Very good. Thank you.
Well, I think our policy is, as in any grants, when the grant ends, then we have to make a judgment as to whether or not what our action is going to be. Now, as to the juvenile part, it seems, if I recall correctly, this was part of funding which was to come back locally because they were closing the state facilities. Right. Is that right?
That's correct.
Right.
And I guess the question I have is the flow of funds to the local facilities equal to what the state was spending, or my impression was that this was a reduction in costs to the state, and there are some real issues now. I noticed the headline in the Star about DCF, which is not directly associated with this, but there are juveniles who need a spatial care beyond just a foster family. Is that right? Or Mr. Thompson, maybe you can speak to that.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Maury Thompson, Acting Deputy County Manager. I'll jump in here to aid. This is an ongoing conversation with the Juvenile Corrections Advisory Board. Commissioner Osterhaus and I were present at the last meeting where, again, was brought up by one of the advocates on that group, Judge Tom Foster, who continues to attempt to hold the state accountable for a full accounting of those dollars. My understanding, we have a representative on that statewide group out of the district attorney's office who also shares that concern about trying to get a thorough accounting of the dollars saved and how they're being allocated. So that body continues to advocate for that. At the conclusion of the last conversation, I believe the consensus was we would make one more attempt, and then perhaps it would need to come to this body for some support from you at some point if we can't get that to help bring your weight to bear on that topic.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Osterhaus.
Follow on.
My recommendation was that we could compose a letter or draft a letter of some sort to try to move that along. If, as Maury said, it didn't get there, I also suggested to the Juvenile Correction Advisory Board that in the event that there's programs like this that we know are successful, that we have data-driven answers with, that if we should need additional funding, we include those in the RARs for next year's budget. Excuse me. And they can go through the process. It's not a guarantee that we'll fund them, but if we know they're working and they're, and the data supports it, it might be something we want to look at for inclusion next year in next year's budget, or
Okay. Mr.
2 years
Ashcraft.
budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Osterhaus. Mr. Thompson, I'm a little confused. There's been a request for some kind of reporting or accountability, and it's not been forthcoming, or they're working on it, or is there something less telling, that less transparent that you're suggesting? I mean, this is an important project. These are important efforts. I'm just trying to understand, and if you don't know, that's fair enough. But what are you saying?
I'm happy to share my understanding, and it is only that. My understanding is there have been repeated requests for a full accounting of the savings tied to the passage of Senate Bill 367, and the chairman is correct. The premise was the savings due to that legislation, closure of facilities, would be reinvested in community-based programs such as the ones that we're discussing today. And that accounting of the savings achieved and how those funds had been used has not been provided
By
the state of
By the
Kansas.
state.
by the executive branch or the judicial branch? Or
By the executive
by
branch,
the
yes.
So is it the Department of Administration or Department of Corrections? How?
Department of Corrections is the entity that the communication has been with.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just my overview opinion was like other programs which the state has said they will fund. As time goes on, those funds diminish, and so a community-based program that the state's supposed to be involved in funding ultimately ends up with local government. And I think in this particular case, the concern is that that's where this program is headed. And so I think before agreeing to step in to take over the state's responsibility, we should be actively involved in encouraging the legislators to adequately fund this kind of important program.
Great.
So,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
follow on. Was the change in funding structure, was that a legislative effort or an executive effort? Do you know?
Well, the Senate bill was passed by the legislature, was signed by the governor, and that closed several of the state facilities for juveniles. In fact, as I recall, the district attorneys across the state of Kansas were opposed to that bill, but that opposition fell on deaf ears for the various reasons that we're looking at right now. So, yeah, okay. Continue on consent?
Consent.
All right, so noted. Next item.
Item number 4, invitation for bid, IFB number 2018-016. Consider authorizing a contract with Mill Valley Construction Incorporated for exterior wooden beam replacement at the Sunset Office Building for a total amount not to exceed $130,500.
Mr. Reinhardt.
Good morning, Chairman Eilert and Commissioners. I'm Brad Reinhardt with the Facilities Department. This project involves the removal and replacement of 13 exterior structural support struts along the south side of the Sunset Office Building. These struts support the building's main glue laminated beams, which support the roof. If you drive by Sunset, you can see that these struts extend out from the building about 60 degrees off the ground and again are attached to the main beams supporting the roof. The existing struts are failing due to moisture penetration, and this work includes the redesign so that the replacement struts don't have this same problem going forward. We'll have additional flashing installed. There'll be an air gap. That'll be part of the design where the struts, attach to the connectors. So that we won't have this problem in the future. 4 companies attended a pre-bid meeting in April of this year. Only 2 companies submitted bids for this work. Initially, KBS was the apparent low bidder. However, upon discussion with KBS to confirm that their bid was accurate and complete, as is our standard practice, it was determined there were omissions and they withdrew their bids. So that led us to the recommended firm, Mill Valley Construction. Their bid was also reviewed for accuracy and completeness by both staff as well as our consultant. And so everything was in order there. So next week we'll be recommending this approval of this contract. We did obtain a opinion of probable cost for the cost at $144,850. This is for $130,500. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
Mr. Reinhardt, how old is that building? When was that constructed?
It's at 2007, so 11 years. 2006, so 12 years old.
Would this kind of repair normal?
It seems to me as a contractor pretty early for what we built.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Reinhardt?
Well,
what's your-
exposed wood, can create situations like this. Again, there was the current struts were in direct contact with their connectors, and so it allowed moisture to be retained and soaked into the struts, causing some deterioration. So, yeah, could it have been prevented with, a better?
Well, I guess
design?
my question is, this is kind of a unique building.
It is unique. with the wood.
And so whether or not that contributed, I don't know. But are there other parts of the unique structure that need to be looked at, examined, whatever you want to call it?
And we are in process of doing that. For example, the glue laminate timbers that support the roof, the 2 end timbers are exposed to the elements, and so we're currently doing some maintenance on those to make sure those are sealed and we don't have water infiltration on those. That's one thing that I know of that we're working on. And I don't know if there
All
are
right.
other
Thank
areas.
you. Other question, Mr. Ashcraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, your question about routine inspections on those architectural details, they can get costly. So I'm glad Mr. Reinhardt is on top of that. So, and I appreciate you including the probable cost estimate. It looks like the one bid, if I can call it that, yes, it technically is a bid, it is less than. So my question is, though, is there just are no other firms out there that we could interest in this? You said there were 4 at the initial meeting, but only 2 offered
Only 2.
submission. I'm not suggesting we go back out because it's, for that amount of money, it's just, it's too costly administratively. But what is our process for making sure that firms that have expertise are consciously notified, not just automatically notified, but to make sure? And I used to call it the shrieker outreach. We had a gentleman that worked for the county a while back who went out and contacted a firm that came in much lower. And are we able to do that for projects like this?
It has been done at times in the past. I don't believe we did that for this project. We know that the market is very busy right now, and this is certainly unique work on some level. So I wouldn't anticipate that there's a great number of firms based on those conditions that would have responded. I'm fortunate we had 2, and it's unfortunate that one was had some missteps in their bid.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Chairman.
Other questions? Mr. Clicken?
I think, Brad, as we're dealing with the new development with the coroner's office and the courthouse, I am assuming that we're taking these types of issues into consideration so that even with the uniquenesses of the building that we're going after, that we're thinking about long-term maintenance and repair on that.
We are.
Is that a fair statement?
That is a very fair statement. We are very concerned about long-term maintenance, and a primary goal is a 75-year building in the case of the courthouse, and certainly with our other buildings, we approach those. We believe we will be approaching that number as well for the
I would hate that we're long gone and this discussion is rehashed by some future commission wondering what the heck we did today. So appreciate it.
Good comment. Action, consent?
Consent?
Consent's good.
Consent. Okay, so noted. Next item.
Item number 5, invitation for bid 2018-040. Consider authorizing a contract with George J. Shaw Construction Company for staging area improvements on Block 29, Town of Olathe, for a total amount not to exceed $243,800.
Yes, Mr. Reinhardt.
Good morning, Brad Reinhardt with Facilities. This project is the next phase of work associated with the construction of parking for the new courthouse project on Block 29 here in downtown Olathe. As you are aware, the Block 29 parking project is separate from the courthouse project, but the site will be used by the courthouse construction team for trailers and material staging over the next couple of years. This work includes additional clearing, grading, and the installation of approximately 12 inches of aggregate base. The work will be performed in such a manner that additional minimal grading will be necessary at the time when which we're ready to actually construct the parking. So we're doing as much of the grading as we can currently so that we're really prepped for the future parking lot. We had 6 responses to this invitation for bid. George J. Shaw Construction Company was the lowest bid received. Their bid, again, was reviewed by staff as well as our consultant and determined that it was complete and accurate. An opinion of probable cost for this project was estimated at $309,555. And upon approval of the contract next week, work will begin the week of June 4th, including installation of construction fencing. So things will really start happening here in a couple of weeks. So with that, I will stand for any questions.
Okay. I would just make this comment. Mr. Brown and I both noted the other day that maybe because of the rains we had, there may need to be some minor maintenance around this block. Has that occurred, or will it occur, so we need to be good neighbors?
It was to commence first thing this morning, and I have not followed up yet, but we did have our grounds crew coming back out. And so this was a good reminder that we need to pay attention to our neighbors and pay attention to their perspective as they view out onto our construction site and drive in and out of their neighborhoods. So we should be today, cleaning up the perimeter of the site, edging, taking out some of the shrubs and trees that are kind of growing along the edges. When the construction fencing goes up, certainly the contractor will be responsible for everything inside, and we'll be watching that very carefully. But we will be responsible for all things exterior. So,
Mr. Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Reinhardt, will public safety sales tax funds be used for this, or is this a general fund expenditure?
Well, this is general fund. This is not from the public safety sales tax.
Very good. And can you share with us briefly the status of the, what do we call it, the HUD house? Yeah, well, that, and I asked that because Mr. Waters attempted to give me a briefing, but it's an important point. If Mr. Brown hasn't heard what the status of the HUD house, is that the right terminology? You know, the one that's not been vacated yet, I don't believe, has it?
Correct.
Yeah.
So the last information I have, the city of Olathe had indicated that they thought June 1st would be the date the county would receive that property. I don't know if that is still on track. I've not received an update, and maybe Joe has something.
I think, Commissioners, that was the last date we have, but then they're not quite sure that they're going to hear that final word back from HUD in time to make June 1, but they hope that they'll be close. So it could be a week or so beyond.
HUD has a process.
Yes, sir.
And it's my understanding that at one level, it's been okayed, but there's another level that needs to sign off. So as soon as that process is completed, which that would be great if it would be done by June 1, but I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah.
So, okay. Other questions?
I do, Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Brown.
Thank you. On the perimeter where the contractor is responsible for the site, how close to the street edge will the construction fencing be set up? Is there an area outside of that fence?
There will be a small area outside, and that's where the
We'll
county
take care of
staff will take care. And I think we need to maintain it, as best we can, weed eating and everything, not just rough mowing. So
Right.
we'll make sure.
Okay. And then one more question. Is there, I haven't seen, I haven't asked, and don't necessarily need to know, except just out of curiosity, the elevation of the parking lot, are we removing, hauling to, building retaining walls? What's happening with the elevation of Block 29 relative to where it's at now versus in the final
I was
analysis?
looking, and unfortunately I'm not a civil engineer, but I was looking at the grading plans before and after. There will be, and Kyle, I don't know if you, I don't know that it'll be significant. I think certainly at the northwest corner, there's quite a slope there, and I think that will be leveled out, but there will still be some rise up along the sidewalk and some landscaping planned along the Kansas Avenue sidewalk there in the final.
As it tapers back to grade, but will that be a retaining wall or will that be a sloped
I
dirt?
think there is a little bit of retaining wall in the final.
I would think it's pretty,
And
there's a lot of ground.
the parking lot will slope towards Kansas, and so that's where we'll have landscaping and, the design is still in progress. So.
Yes. I heard that somewhere.
Last I saw.
In stereo. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Continue on action.
Consent's fine.
Consent?
Fine.
Okay, so noted. Next item.
Mr. Chairman,
Excuse me.
I'd like to jump in a little bit on the communication with the neighbors. As Brad said, we want to be sensitive to what our work that's going on there, what's coming. So we have, through social media and the communications office, sending communications out on what we anticipate happening in the next 3 to 4 weeks on the project property.
All right.
So
Thank you.
we will continue that going forward.
Okay. Next item.
Item number 6, resolution number 032-18, application number SW-CU-3374, GA. Consider a request from Brett Young, applicant and landowner, to revise a conditional use permit to allow an oversized accessory building located at 29825 West 159th Street in Section 14, Township 14, Range 22, Johnson County.
Mr. Leipzig. No.
Sorry. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Jay Leipzig. I appreciate the comments before earlier this morning. This item is brought to you on behalf of the Southwest Consolidated Zoning Board. It was recommended for approval on April 25th, 2018 for conditional use permit approval for a revision to a previously approved conditional use permit. This is essentially for an additional 480 square feet of a lean-to that's added as an extension to the previous permit. The other thing to note is that this staff is comfortable with the 20-year term as recommended by the zoning board for this item.
Okay, any questions? Well, this is a zoning item, so remain on action. Next item, number 7.
Resolution number 037-18, consider authorizing the acquisition by eminent domain of a permanent sewer line easement across property in Westwood, Kansas, in connection with a new subdivision development.
Mr. Ford.
Thank you. Bob Ford, Legal Department. The Bryans own a piece of property at 49th Terrace and Booth Avenue, and it's shown on the site map. The dark area is the area that we need a new permanent sewer line easement. In order to stub out a sewer line from the Bryans property onto the property to the south, which is a former Shawnee Mission School District piece of property that was sold by the school district and purchased by Blue Stem LLC, which is a Clay Blair company. The intent is to put 4 or 5 new homes on what's now a vacant lot to the south of the Bryants. There's a picture 1 or picture 2, it won't matter. That's the good one. Go back to that one. This is the Bryants property, and in this picture, I'm standing on the new development property. The existing manhole, you can see here, is about 7 or 8 feet from the south property line. That chain link fence post is the property line between the 2 boundaries. And so the new sewer line needs to come from that manhole to where I'm standing, basically, and then moves up into the...
Where you're standing.
Yeah, I'm standing on Clay Blair's property looking at...
In the
In the picture, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And so it comes about 7 feet to the south. So it's pretty minor. It's a pretty minor taking. The property owners were initially concerned about the size of the easement. There was a temporary construction easement that went along with it, and it extended to the north of the manhole. They have a nice yard. They have a little raised garden. They have some planter boxes. They have a sprinkler system. They hired a lawyer, Jim Orr, who has been a city attorney, to represent them. And we negotiated reducing the easement, drawing it back. So now we don't go beyond that manhole. So all the work will be done to the south in an area that's already encumbered by a KCP&L easement, already encumbered by a Johnson County wastewater easement, but we need a little extra here to fill in a gap and do the work. Because of the new development, the developer will pay for the cost of the acquisition. So the developer negotiated with the landowners, tried to come to terms, couldn't do it. They were negotiating 2 aspects. One was the construction-related aspects, and then one was the damage to the property. As we scaled back the construction-related issues, of course, the damages should have gone down, and I think did, but the owners wanted both the construction-related concessions and a lot of money, and they just couldn't end up coming to terms. So at the end of the day, there was a $5,000 offer made. That offer was never accepted by the landowners. The developer said he couldn't go any further, so then we stepped in and will acquire the easement for the sewer line, which is a public sewer line. I've been in communications with the owners this week. I still have made the offer of $5,000 for the easement. There's a good chance we'll come to terms, but if not, we need to move ahead and acquire the easement through the use of eminent domain, which I know this board does not like doing and is always against, but here we've really reached an impasse.
Well, obviously, as for Johnson County wastewater, as we've done in the past, do hope the negotiations can continue and come to an agreement without exercising this possibility, but I think it needs to move ahead. Questions, Mr. Ashcraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ford, why $5,000? So how do you come up, or how did they come up with $5,000 versus $3,000 or $30,000?
Well, I think there was a difference of about,
Bob, could you talk in the mic?
I think there was a difference of about, between, the owners wanted 20 and Mr. Blair was thinking it was worth about 500, and they tried to work towards the middle. It was just their negotiation, and 5,000 was seen as a number that would buy the easement. I think if we go to condemnation, I think the award will be significantly less, maybe not over $1,000.
And does it take any structures?
No, nothing.
It digs into a garden area and a fence, basically? Is that?
No fence. There's no fence there. There's just, what you see is literally the distance between the extension there. It needs to come over about 7 or 8 feet is all. And there's a little raised, I would call it just a raised garden where they have a few vegetables and potato plants and things. But we're going to protect all that and restore it. And I think we've done a great job in negotiating the easement terms. And I believe the owners probably aren't concerned anymore about the construction of the sewer line. They've always been disappointed that the vacant property behind them is now going to be developed into a new small subdivision. So, of course, anybody would be upset that that's happening, but that's kind of, I think, lapped over onto this issue.
All right. Well, this will remain on action. Thank you very much. Next item.
Item number 8, consider authorizing contract extensions with multiple vendors for countywide term and supply furniture purchases in an amount not to exceed $300,000 through November 30th, 2018.
Ms. Lyons.
Good morning, Chairman Eilert, Commissioners. Robin Lyons, Purchasing Manager. As a reminder, the focus of the item before you is contract extensions that allow the county to procure all furniture, not the internal decision-making process used when making large purchases. That information will be presented at a study session in July. The request before you is for contract extensions with the following 10 vendors: Concepts for Business, LLC, Commercial Concepts, LLC, Encompass Corporation, John A. Marshall Company, Scott Rice Office Works, Spaces, Inc., Staples Advantage, SSI Furnishings, United Office Products, and BA Designs, LLC. Of the 5 vendors just listed, 5 are Johnson County businesses: Concepts for Business, LLC, John A. Marshall Company, Scott Rice Office Works, Spaces, Inc., and United Office Products, Inc. The current contracts were bid in 2012, and they are set to expire today, May 31st of 2018. Purchasing in collaboration with facilities have been thoughtful in the timing of bringing this item before you. The contracts have been a focus for some time, but due to workload with the courthouse, medical examiner, library facilities, and identifying the needs of future large purchases, it was determined to delay going out to the marketplace until more information could be provided. Extensions of the current contracts lock in the agreed upon discounts with all vendors through November 30th of 2018. The contract authority requested today with the extensions encompasses purchases to be made for the new library in Lenexa, as well as anticipated furniture needs for Johnson County Parks and Rec and the other 34 county departments and agencies. A study session will be scheduled with the board in July to review the following items: asset management, term and supply process, furniture acquisition, advantages of a uniform strategic process, And return on investment, we'll be looking at life cycle cost, including warranty. A new solicitation will be issued immediately upon conclusion of the study session. And the current contracts are also offered, just as an FYI to you, the current contracts that we have are offered on the MARC listing for all entities to use countywide and metro-wide. And with that, I stand for questions.
Questions? Mr. Clicker?
Robin, I don't have any problem with the process that you've gone through to go ahead and work these extensions out. But $300,000 for furniture just kind of, it's like this. And I recognize a lot of these costs, or the furniture costs, are buried in all the various departments. But it leads me to wonder, what the heck are we buying for $300,000? And I know we've got a courthouse and a coroner's office coming up down the line that's going to have to be fully furnished, which makes me ask the question, like with mobile equipment, vehicles, we have a replacement program. Do we have something similar in place for furniture? And I guess what makes, I don't know. And I don't necessarily want an answer right now, but I'm raising that issue, and I would like to have a little bit of comfort level on what's going out there. Public perception is all of a sudden we see a $300,000 bill for furniture. And what was put in the packet doesn't give me a comfort level of what. Chances are it's all been approved through the budgets and so forth, but there is no comfort level on that. So if staff would take a look at that, I get it may be more of a presentation type deal that needs to be addressed, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Mr. Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow on to this, Mr. Klicka, if you were suggesting or asking to kind of look at this as a line item expenditure over time, this may be very reasonable, it may be very low, but without a comparison of what we're buying and why, it's hard to offer much context. And I mean, I support the effort to go forward and your strategic approach. I think that makes sense. Yeah. But yeah, when it just comes up $300,000, it's just like, really? Well, what are we getting for that? And is this unusual? So just a suggestion as we go forward, maybe you can include kind of that longitudinal look at furniture and the costing of it.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, well, this will remain on action. Are there any other
Chairman,
items?
one last thing on this. This is not an impact to the process of what's being done. And I subscribe to, I don't have a problem with the bidding process and what's going on. It's just, as I said, try to get those, what that $300,000 is for. So whatever you can do.
All right, any other questions? Okay, that concludes our agenda review. We are adjourned, and we'll reconvene in a few minutes for our 11 a.m. Committee of the Whole meeting. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.